Thanks again for joining us today, everyone, on another episode of Epilogues and Epiphanies. Today, we're going to be talking about the Hunger Games with a new friend.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jake Rupp. I've been teaching for 20 years. My favorite part of my job, really, among all the classes I teach, is my young adult novel course.
I mentioned in one of your videos about, when the kids first read the books, a lot of times in junior high, they're too young for them. I think I just worldview was a little too young for them at that point. Yeah, I think looking back at these now too, I'm also a lot more empathetic towards the Katniss character than I was then. It's really hard to be friendly and likable when there's a lot of stuff going on.
She's so authentic, which is why she can crumble an entire capital, because she's not really paying attention to it always in the same ways that you see Haymitch be exposed as later on in this series. And that's fascinating because, yeah, she's not necessarily likable, but there's been so many likable tributes that have come and gone before her that her difference is what makes her so refreshing.
There's a line early on in the movie when I think they're on the train. Peeta's looking for Haymitch and he says something like, "I just don't think there's anything wrong with asking for a little help." And she doesn't say anything back. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking for help if you think you can get some, is kind of her vibe in that moment. She's gotten so good at surviving that that's all she really knows how to do.
And those conversations, through those Hunger Games up until she finds him painted as that damn rock, those conversations are so guarded because she is fully under the impression, because she needs to be, that he's going to try and kill her. And so it's all kind of part of the act. And even though she wants to see through it, her skepticism of him is this driving force. And so I think a lot of times when we read it, we know how it turns out. Hunger Games became part of the monoculture. Hunger Games, Star Wars, right? And so I think it's really easy, especially as a viewer now, to watch it and almost overlook how appropriate her behavior is towards Peeta. Because odds, they don't know there's going to be a rule change.
No.
Even if she trusts him, why get close? That's never worked for her before.
No,
So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's kind of, it's really interesting, just to think about her in context. We think about a lot of these characters, in our context and how their behavior fits, what our life looks like. But when you think about, what she's ever known, and thinking about Effie's context a little bit too.
if we just look at that first film in exclusivity, you have Effie Trinket starting to finally question what she's doing in a way where it's really tragic that it takes we might have a winner for her to actually break through and be oh, there might be a possibility of a relationship with this person moving forward.
Right. Yeah.
And she's never had to consider that because they just get hosed every games.
Or she's chosen not to consider that. She does seem for her context, she seems like she's attempting to be a kind person. For what she knows to be, she's trying to be nice, I think. She just has a very limited perspective of what that means and what that entails. And I think for her relationship with Haymitch, even just, that context too, and all of that, and maybe even trying not to get attached, and that changing her perspective when she actually kind of does. She's such a stark contrast, and they do that so well in the capital versus the districts. And she seems like the poster girl for the capital, you know what I mean? So for her to get stuck with District 12 is kind of weird feeling, I think, a little bit. If you would almost imagine to get your B League or something, but
there it is. It's it's a starter job. Right? This is where we start, and then we climb the rung to one of the more desirable ones. And that disconnect that you point out, between the capital and the districts, to her, expressing pity is kindness. That's where kindness comes from. I up here feel bad for you, but look at all this fancy stuff that I can give you. Because to her, that is what affection looks like, is just stuff and food and opulence, and look at how nice your life is before you go into this thing and die. And I don't want to necessarily humanize you, Katniss and Peeta, but I do really like you, and doesn't that mean a lot coming from me?
Yeah. Aren't I nice? Yeah.
Right. This is so hard for me, Effie Trinket. Again, it's all status, right? And we as like decent, not in the capital people can look at this and be like, you send kids off to their death. How do you remedy that? But the disconnect is so large because these are the Hunger Games. Why do we do the Hunger Games? Well, as a punishment. Why do we keep on doing it? Because we always have. And that sort of appeal to tradition, right? Where we just like, we keep on doing it because it's the way it's always been. Why? We can't change that. It's foundational. And she's bought into that so hard as somebody who's living not only in the capital, but a pretty decent life of luxury. But it's status. It is status. And the clothing, I think, is just attention-seeking consumerism. Buy it because we have it. And they do that even when we get to the second movie and you learn that they're going to these parties and the people are like, you can just drink this, you'll throw up, and then you can just taste everything.
That part has stuck with me forever and ever. I'm like, what?
The part even creepier, and I made a post about this years ago because I was watching that movie. I watch them a lot, if I'm being honest. But there's a part where Katniss and Peeta are walking into that party. It's early on. And there's the creepiest guy. And as Katniss walks by, he just like touches her as she goes by. Like, but it's so zoo animal creepy, like, and pointing to all of the underage things that, Finnick Odair ultimately ends up talking about too, about his experience as being a young Victor and what ends up happening to them. And, you even see that with Haymitch in that last book where they're putting him in cages just to like show him off. I mean, they're not humans.
No. And it's like, look at this like weird creature that survived. It's like fetishized like a lot. You survive and you win, but do you really win? Like basically they just end up being trafficked,
Yes.
for the rest of their lives.
Victors belong to the capital. And so they have the people there, the citizens, the viewers, they own them. And so then you have these people, and I think the movie does this and the book doesn't ever do it because the book is always first person, right? And so in the movie, you get to see people actually watching the Hunger Games and like observing it. And yes, they're forced to watch it. But ultimately, and Snow says this, like, they need a little bit of hope. Like there has to be just a little like underlying hope. And so if we can tie the Hunger Games to what ultimately is a prize for everybody, which is if your district tribute wins, then everybody gets extra food for a year. And so you get that, like you can't help, even if you win, even if you hate it, you're not turning that food down.
No.
You don't have the privilege to protest.
You're still beholden to them. Yeah.
Yeah, because you need to eat it because you will die. And so that whole idea of ownership just, it takes over everything. Yes, they have to watch it, but they still reap the rewards of the winning and they are still living in fear if they don't. So it's always going to win for the capital until somebody brings it down. This is why I teach it. These are the kinds of conversations that a guy gets to have in his class because students start to pick up on these things too. And every year there's different parallels and there's these different concepts that students point out and they're devouring these books. And then I get the pleasure of showing them the second movie, which I think is like the
that is movie. The movie. Yeah.
It's the book. It's the movie.
Yeah.
And they get to experience that and sort of the shift from, I don't know, the stylistic choices that are done in the first one to something that is a bit, I think, more accurate to the tone of the Hunger Games in its entirety. Plus, they have better source material. Like that second book is so good.
The second book is so good. And I feel like the first book was still almost trying to be like a kids appropriate movie somehow. Like in some ways when the subject matter really never really should be. But I feel like in the second one, it's like we're kind of okay with being more intense and mature, and like even though the whole theme is obviously that, but like I feel like there was a watering down a little bit feeling when I remember when I saw the first movie the first time of like just feeling like it lost a little bit of like the punch in a way, but that could have just been my perspective. But
I think there's something to it. I think especially what the movie does that the book kind of is able to cover up is this very forced love triangle that my students just like hate more and more every year that this goes on. But it's, if the book came out in 2008, your source material it comes from Twilight. Like that's when that's the year the first Twilight movie came out. And then that's also the year the last Harry Potter movie came out. And so I think that's right. And so you have this sort of gap. And so we're now, these love triangles are sort of starting
It
to,
was very much a thing.
it was such a, it's such a thing. And I think what the movie does, though, I guess to my point, is the movie emphasizes that Gale is in chapter 1 and a bit of 2, and then he's at the very, very end, I think. Like, but Gale and Katniss aren't together for 25 chapters of that book. And so the movie, I think that you can't get away from the distance of it. Even if she's
Yeah.
thinking about him, the difference is going to be on
Right.
your screen. So we will see him and we'll see
Yeah.
him watching it and we'll see him concerned, but he's so far away. And like
Yeah.
that love triangle just doesn't get a chance to have the tension that you feel
Right.
when you read it and you get to see Katniss thinking about
Yeah.
those
Her
things.
inner monologue for sure about like the like conflict that she feels between one and the other and all of that kind of thing, like I think was just very, yeah, it definitely added a layer to that part of the story that I feel like did get kind of hollowed out a lot in the movies, for sure. I think the definitely like, if anything felt exaggerated in this, how ridiculous people are willing to go in terms of their appearance, which is what makes Cinna such an interesting character because he's so like restrained almost.
And we can talk about casting in this movie and like the highs and lows of it, but Lenny Kravitz's Cinna is ideal. Ideal. I don't think they could have found somebody to play that character with this sort of reserved rebellion that Lenny Kravitz was able to. And again, like you need an alternate timeline for me to prove that I'm right, but his care for her is so different than
He's,
everybody
yeah.
else. Even his style, like if we're talking about his style as a stylist, is even more subdued in a space where flamboyance is valued, and he's restraining all of that. And he's gonna, yes, he's gonna light her on fire and make a scene, but it's not a scene because it's like a spectacle of fashion. It's a
It's
scene
not a
because she's
pointless
on
spectacle.
fire. She is on fire.
Yeah.
And so and I think he plays that super well. I think they captured a lot of like the smaller details with like his eyeliner that they discuss in the book, and the way that, again, it's very moderated, but it is definitely there because to me, it always felt like Cinna was camouflaging himself.
Yeah.
I just need to blend in enough so I can do something to make this situation better. And his juxtaposition with Effie Trinket when you see her and she's just all like literally dolled up, right? Like just
Yeah.
caked on. I mean, she looks artificial, and then
Yeah.
Cinna looks authentic, and
Yeah.
her kindness is pity and his kindness is kindness.
Yeah.
You can
She
see the
says,
difference.
"Aren't you gonna congratulate me? Why would I do that?" Like, yeah. I mean, just like the acknowledgement of the truth after being around people acting like this is a party for, days on end would just be so stark. And I think there's something to that, like, I don't know, there's something interesting about this like guy that like is in the capital, is kind of there, but like is, like you said, just kind of quietly rebelling, and like this and he kind of locks in on her like right away, like he like, and I think that's something that I found really interesting in that is like that authenticity kind of like finds itself, like it finds it in other people. And I think, like he knew this was someone I could help tell a story with, like, he knew there was something to tell, and like kind of immediately, and she couldn't help it with her, volunteering for her sister and like that kind of thing. Like she didn't think that was on the table at all. Like that was not on her radar. Katniss, who was prepared for everything, was not prepared for her sister being called up. Like I mean, at least
If
in the
there's a
movie version.
if there's a jaw drop, and I talk to my students about this a lot. So a thing the movie captures really well, as best it can, is that the Hunger Games and all of those as novels, one of the reasons that they're so particularly readable is that the last lines of those chapters are elite. Like they're so good. And so the end of that first chapter is just Prim getting reaped, and it's just Primrose Everdeen. And you go into that book and you're like, I know Katniss goes in. Right? Like, obviously, I
Yeah.
know Katniss goes in. And even if you watch the movie and you haven't seen the text, which is happening more frequently now, you're like, well, it's going to be Katniss. Well, it's not Katniss. It's her sister. And,
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah. How'd
maybe
we
now
get
we
here?
know because, like, I volunteer as tribute, and her and Jennifer Lawrence just demolishing that
Oh my
line.
gosh,
And, like,
that was, yeah.
like it's perfect. And so I guess
Yeah.
people know that. And so even then the mystery is kind of taken away. But if you can look at it in a vacuum with no prior knowledge, Prim getting reaped, like you said, is the unexpected for somebody who has who has manufactured a lot of control in her life.
Mm-hmm.
Like Katniss has a
Yeah.
lot of control.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to rely on anybody for food. She can rely on
No.
herself. She doesn't have to rely on anybody to take care of her family. She can rely on herself.
Mm-hmm.
But can't do much when they pick your
Yeah.
name out of the bowl.
No. Yeah. That just like that struck me this time when I was watching it. It was like this girl has every system she knows like this many steps is to, you know what I mean? Like she's got everything like calculated down, but this was so far off of her radar as a possibility that she doesn't immediately do it because it takes her a while to process that it's happened. Like her sister has to start walking and then then she screams. Like it's just like not so far out of her like realm that it doesn't hit her immediately that that's what's happening. And I think, yeah, Jennifer Lawrence, I think I had feelings and whatever about it at the time. I think she does a really good job. I don't know who else could have done it better, like honestly.
So the big conversation with that, to kind of answer that, is Isabel Furman, who plays Clove. Okay, Clove. She had not been casted, but she made it very, very deep in the run to be Katniss Everdeen. But the problem was that because she looked the part, but she looked too young. And so when you put her next to Gale in this sort of like
It was
romantic
getting
will
weird,
they,
yeah.
won't they, it didn't look right. And so
Yeah.
so she became Clove. And so if you look at them side by side and you look at like, well, then who could it have been? I think Isabel Furman would have been a knockout Katniss Everdeen, but casting somebody who just has a bit more of the appearance of age in order to stay true to that like dynamic with Gale, I mean, I think is the only choice that a person can make reasonably.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense too. Like, because you do kind of have to pick a teenager or young adult that looks more like a teenager because even in the, you get into the second one, like we're already talking about themes of like, oh, we're faking a pregnancy. Like, you know what I mean? So like to do that with someone who looks really young, like would be weird. Like it would feel off putting more so than, and that's the other thing too, is like, I think a lot of people I think about her volunteering and what that would have done. I mean, if I'm in District 12, like, thank you for not making me watch Prim fight. You know what I mean? Like, like Katniss, I'm sorry you have to go, but thank you for not making me watch Prim die. Like, like there's a little bit of that. And so like, even that idea of like seeing what she did for her sister, but like the send off that they give her, like, I think is also kind of like, hey, we all should do this for the younger ones. Like, I think it feels like part of that too, because it would have been a much harder pill to swallow. I mean, it's not that it's not an impossible one already, but like, to watch this 12-year-old, like, versus like the ones that look more like, adults per se, so to speak. Like, we can kind of at least train our brains out of it in some ways. And so, yeah, it's just
it can be less unfair.
Yeah, I
had a student point this out, and I thought about it for the years since. But she points out this idea, kind of like we're saying about how it'd be so hard to watch a 12-year-old, right? How it's so hard to watch Rue, and it's not going to go well. But you see her, and it's so sad and it's so brutal. But the student pointed out, that people in the capital and even people from other districts look at District 12 and you're like, well, they're the worst off. And they're the type of people that like bad things happen to. And so of course bad things are going to happen to District 12. And we can be a little bit more at peace with that because like that's just to be expected. And her pointing that out as not from her perspective, but from the perspective of others that watch District 12 to then have a Katniss Everdeen is now amplified. Like, wait. Like they have a shot. So now all the ways that we're kind of numb to the tragedy that goes on in 12 all the time.
Yeah.
Now we're even more excited about the possibility. I mean, then now we're a little bit thrilled. And you throw in a love story that Peeta, so wonderfully crafts. I think Josh Hutcherson, I think he gets casted as Peeta specifically because of his ability to have those conversations with Caesar in the
Yeah.
interviews up
Oh,
front,
yeah.
maybe more
He
than anything else.
that's his most shining moment is when he's up there like being charming on those interviews for
Yeah.
sure. Like
He's
he's
charming.
definitely
He's so charming. It's like he turns it on because he's so
yeah.
terrified. And you see him
Yeah.
be terrified, but you do see him be thoughtful, on the train and as they're kind of exploring their new home in the capital for the 2 weeks they're there. But he turns that on with Caesar Flickerman. And
Yeah.
to me, that's where that casting just right away makes the most sense.
I thought he was good. I think there's like or something you said there with with like people like I mean we see that even today like we're just comfortable with like it's why
Right.
certain
These are
people
the types of things that these things happen to these types of people.
yeah
And it is somehow less tragic. Like,
yeah
yes, it's horrible, but it's also so frequent. And like this is
yeah
if it's gonna happen, this is who it happens to.
it's who it
And
happens
that's where
to.
District 12 lies. And
Yeah, I think there's also something too that I just and maybe I'm reaching here a little bit, but like it's a concept like I feel like is kind of this an outshoot of like Protestant work ethic of like if you do all the good things and you work the hardest, you can outwork bad things happening to you. Like there's kind of this idea of like this almost prosperity gospel ideal of like
Mhm.
you can outgood your way from bad things happening to you. You can work harder, you can do this, do that, the whatever. And so then there becomes like this layer of like almost like we don't even think about it because it's subtext, but like they could have worked harder and maybe not put themselves in that position or you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things I think sometimes are part of that a little bit of like, well, and in this case it's true. Like, well, the districts had it coming because,
Right. And they've had it coming for generations now. I mean, we're at the
yeah.
74th games at this point. This is the way that and I think the unfairness of the reaping I don't think ever gets subdued. And I
Mm-mm.
think, because if you look at what it takes to like take risks and work hard in a district, it's to take out the tesserae and to have your names in it even more. The act of working hard is just making you more vulnerable. It cancels out the entire principle. So and even then, you never outgrow it because you end up having kids and now they're taking tesserae out so that
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
eat and you have no control over that because like the cycle doesn't stop unless you don't have kids. And even then you
Yeah.
got to watch it.
Yeah, it's like it's definitely like this control cycle, and I think that it's like I thought one thing that like kind of back earlier to there, the thing that always felt weird to me when I first watched it, and when they were kind of describing it, is like the capital looks like it's in the future, and the districts look like they're in the past, and like there's this like idea I think that I realize now of like, well, whenever there's control though, like we kind of go back to these like authoritarian like kind of structures and like girls in dresses and this that and the other, you know what I mean, like it's just very more traditional kind of categories and boxes for everything's and how everything operates. It's very much because otherwise I don't know how it makes sense that in the future that far that they're like have these like high tech clothes and stuff, but then they're wearing like these clothes that look like they're from the 40s. Like it's kind of crazy.
And
Yeah, no, it's just so yeah, I think it's definitely it makes choices of like this is a really hard, gruesome, and like honestly, it's such a convoluted way to punish and control that it's like easy to get lost in it, even as a viewer of the movie. I think of like, wait, how do we get here? Why are we here? Like, what's going on? And I think that's what I think that's the point, like to kind of just like it's also distraction. Like, like you're so busy worried about all of the things that you forget that oh, this is tradition. Like you're saying tradition. Like it's tradition. We're not, we're thinking tradition, not oppression.
yep,
So like,
it's pageantry is what it. I mean,
hmm
it is a literal chariot ride pageant of these kids, and we're gonna celebrate them, and this is so fun. And then it'll be
yeah,
over, and then we'll wait for it next year. And I remember asking a student, and it's a conversation that always ends up happening. And so like the example I bring up is like MMA, right? Like UFC. I don't watch it. But so if there was UFC, but the top build fight was a consented fight to the death. Like they both agreed to it. How many of you would watch it? And these kids, a lot of the kind of the boys, but they're like, man, they both agreed to it. Like, yeah, nobody made them do it. No, they didn't have to do it, but they agreed to it. And there's a massive, like, eternal cash prize. You never have to think about it again. They're like, well, if they both agreed to it, like, maybe. And then it's like, okay, so let's go ahead and break that down. And like, where does that conversation act? Like, do you really, it's easy for you to say, maybe it shouldn't be easy, but it's easier for you to say than it is in practice to watch just a live fight to the
Murder.
death. Like
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. And I think it's when I don't know, because when you're in the middle of reading the Hunger Games, I think you like to think that maybe you would be able to like tolerate this because you're so compelled by the games as you read it. But that's something I wrote down. At the end, you talk about one of the last prompts here was like big questions it raises. And I had 2 right in a row that was like, what does it mean to watch suffering? And is this movie criticizing spectacle while being a spectacle itself?
Yeah.
And like that, it's that part of it. It's the same thing when we talk about Squid Games. When you hear students that are kind of like, no, I'd watch it. Like, would you? Would like really? And you
But
tell
really,
people you
though,
watched it. Would you really? Or are you
Yeah.
like, I don't
trying to
know.
be cool.
Just
Yeah.
are you like gut instinct saying, no, I would do that? Like, sure, they both agree, but what does that say about the place that facilitates it?
Right.
Like,
What does that say
what
about
is that?
us that we're willing to broadcast it? What does it
That
say
we're willing to
about
pay people to do it a lot of money. We'll pay you a lot of money to do this. And that's
We
where these
want to see you,
conversations
yeah.
start. Right. Like that's where like, okay, even if you say you'd watch it, even if a company was willing to put up the money, would this be permitted now by like law enforcement or
Yeah.
regulators of anything above the level of somebody being like, no, I'll give you guys a bunch of money to fight to the death on TV.
I think
Like,
it depends on
is that
how
something?
much capitalist industry there could be behind it that would drive jobs, because I
It
think
does shock
it's
me. Yeah. And so it's those conversations. And so then, I think there's even something about the Hunger Games as you watch it where you're getting attached to your Katnisses and your Peetas and your Ruse, and you're starting to kind of villainize the careers a bit. And they do, they do such a good job of making them just seem like they're machismo. All of them
yeah,
is like
yeah,
so pronounced because they really do think they're going to win and they're all hyped up. This is what their life is for, is to get here and the glory of it. And then they get to that cornucopia and it counts it down and it takes forever for those games to start in that scene. And then you're like, this is actually terrifying.
yeah, yeah.
This is a wide open, it's just a field. It's just a field. And they're
So
just
we're
in a
gonna just
field
kill these other people in a field. Yeah.
right now. Like at the end of this thing, people start dying. And I think that's the moment visually where the stakes are so like, even though you see the highlights a couple of times, like
Yeah.
early on in the broadcasts and like, how great the previous games were. But it's that moment where now it becomes a lot more human visually
for sure.
than I think the books can ever do. The books can't
Yeah.
do that. They slow the music
No.
down and you see the kids like, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think if
the
you watch
sounds
that
and
and then
all
you're like,
that.
no, I would watch that in real life. Okay. Now
Okay,
you have
if
a
you are, then
problem.
maybe I don't know if I want to keep talking to you, because I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep my distance here, maybe a little bit.
For sure.
Yeah.
That would be horrifying. It's terrifying. Like you can
Yeah.
lie to yourself about it and then you see it even in this fictional cinematic world. It's like, absolutely not. Nope.
Yeah. No. And it should. And that's the thing too. I think, you made an interesting point about like this kind of like glorification of violence for entertainment. And I do think,
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like I realized when I went through my grad program, it kind of felt like, so I did my graduate work in marriage and family therapy, and like there's so much work that you have to do just as part of your coursework, as on top of like mandated number of sessions yourself, like to be able to do. And they're telling us you can only take someone as deep or heal someone as deeply as you have dealt with your own stuff. And I'm like,
Okay.
okay, so we better get to work. And so, there's just like a lot of like introspective papers and things like that. And I just remember it feeling like someone had sandpapered my skin off. Like every time I was trying to watch anything, like it just like everything hurt. Like I felt everything. And it was like, it kind of, I think we should. I mean, to some degree, like, like these things should bother us. Like, and
Yes.
I think that's the problem is like there's so much that's become spectacle and news and headlines and things. And it's like, it's just noise now. It's just the way it always is. There's just always something bad happening. There's always something bad happening to someone else. There's always some problem. There's always some political thing. There's always something. And it's so easy to just like tune it out and not care. And like, I think it's just like this is like a good reminder to be like, yeah, but those are people, like, those were kids and those are people. Like, and so it's
And
just
Katniss falls into that in that movie. So she's up in the tree early on, night one, right? And she's strapped up in that tree, and that girl lights the District 6 tribute, lights the fire, and she is over there. And Katniss, I don't remember. I've read it and I've seen it so many times that sometimes I get details confused. And so I'm sorry if I'm like
you're okay.
overlapping too much. But in her head, Katniss is like, I'm gonna kill this girl myself. Like you're exposing me and you're compromising my safety. Would it be better if I just got out of this tree and did it myself? So that's part one of what you're talking about, is like just even being so desensitized. But she gets a bit of an out because she's in the games, of
Right.
course, right? But then the careers go and attack that girl. And they're then under the tree and they realize the cannon hasn't fired. And the thing that people don't really talk about, and maybe this speaks to your point about how sometimes violence can sort of get overlooked, even if we want to call it like an act of mercy. Peeta's like, I'll take care of it. And Peeta goes back and kills that girl. And then he comes back to the group like, but Peeta goes and does that. And so often it's always talked about this idea that Katniss only kills out of self-defense. And sometimes that's like one of the criticisms is like, we're really glamorizing Katniss and making her a hero in spaces where it's almost easier to be a hero because you never really have to do anything bad, right? Like
Right.
all of
Like
her
everything
killings are
is
sort
kind
of
of okay. Yeah.
yeah, all of her killings are always framed as being this acceptable thing in context. But then you look at what, Peeta did to that girl, and there's never any they never talk about it. There's like never
Yeah.
any clarification on what happened there, but he definitely did it. And maybe that's kind of going towards this, even when we watch the movie, and it's like, are we gonna just overlook what Peeta just did? Not that we need to judge him for it necessarily, but people don't ever talk about that part.
Well, yeah, I think that's interesting too, though. It is interesting that of the things that of the violence that Peeta inflicts, it's one where, like you said, kind of like a mercy killing of like she's not
Maybe
gonna
that's
make
what we
it.
like to assume.
I mean, I I would assume based on the way it kind of was going, like, and like the cannon hasn't gone off and they're like realizing it. Like we thought we all but killed her, you know what I mean? Like, and it seems like we didn't finish the job, like kind of thing. And so, I mean, everything about his choices and character makes me think that that's what his decision would be. Like if we're thinking about like he's not the violent one in any of this for the most part. He's kind of the political one trying to survive in that way. But it's just very, but yeah, to even have to be able to like, because I mean, what was his choice? Like, not do that, and then what they might do to her, like, or what might happen to her if she has to sit out or get eaten by those mutts or something. You know what I mean? Like, I
And
mean,
that is the question, right? Is when it comes down to it, the question Peeta probably has to ask himself is what am I willing to do to make sure Katniss lives? And if it comes
yeah,
down to taking the life of this District 6 girl, not even to protect himself so he can then carry on because like she's a
yeah,
threat, but he needs to protect the ruse that he has created with these careers that he has managed to infiltrate, that he knows he's on thin ice with, but he also knows that they are hunting her and he is a key to it because he is so damn smart. At least in the gameplay within context, he recognizes that he can take a bit of power.
hmm,
He can do something with that life that, I don't want this to all be for nothing. And so he can actually do something with it. But yeah, he kills her. That feels like
I mean,
survival a little bit
there's
more.
no one, yeah, there's no one gets out clean
No.
of these really. I mean, and that's the whole thing is like now you are also complicit. Like you are, yes, you won. You can't talk about how bad it was and what we did to you because you also participated in it, and like, and also you, like you said earlier, you need us for your food. and those kinds of things. But like I like looking back and like this the way that this ends now though, like it was always good, but like I think there's something just like personally a little bit sweeter for me of like this girl out like thinking this like whole system of like at the end of like you thought you were smarter than me, but I just think I think so much differently than you. Like you couldn't see me coming. Like this like
It's a pretty
with the
fragile
berries.
system if a couple of berries can take it out.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing. Like there's like not like the thing I think
Excuse
is
me,
just
sorry.
like underestimating people. Like, you know, like and not thinking, not even realizing that like thinking that your way of viewing this whole system that you've built is the only way of viewing it and like not really like recognizing what they might be seeing or interpreting or using or their motivations might be at all. Like I think it's just so it's like hubris, like that it's the downfall of this particular game. It's just like they didn't see that what if they decide to kill themselves? Like, you know, like what if everybody just decided I mean they could have berries or not, they could have decided to do that. Like so
So what you bring up is a good point. That's like you want to say they wouldn't play, but like
yeah.
tributes aren't the only thing that can kill
Right.
tributes in those
Yeah.
arenas. So they'll find a way to get you. Like
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
not gonna just outlive it,
I'm
and the
just
bell
gonna like
rings, and they're like,
live in the arena now. Like this is my
right,
home. Like that's
this is
not
my
an
home in
option.
this sweet cave.
Yeah, right. Like that's not. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Your point about like this the self preservation because I do think that is such a we like to think we're all evolved past it, but we're not. And it's so that's the one way to get I feel like that we have been the most manipulated and like as a society right now is like to threaten our way of being and say that we're the ones that have the answer for it or they're the ones that are threatening it and like that's why you should listen to us or you should do this or that and like you know like the things that people will do or believe when they feel like that like I like to say the bottom Jenga block of their little beliefs tower gets nudged a
Okay,
little bit
sure.
too much, you know, like is like they'll do anything to keep that tower together, you know, like and so it's just
You see that during these overthrows as this series starts to like continue to progress. I mean, think of how many years that they went to that. I think one of the most atrocious parts of the pageantry of the Hunger Games, aside from the games itself, is when they send the victors to all of the victor to all of the districts where like the kids have passed away and they put their families up on the pedestals and then they have to address them. And people sat through that for 70 some years. I mean, obviously, it wasn't just the first one. That's what the fourth book tells us. But for so many years and just accepted it like this is just the way that it is and like people are there's so many of them and they outnumber all of the people that are enforcing this on them but they still don't do anything and they almost don't recognize their own self-sufficiency in this text or in this film or anywhere, right? Like you if you get rid of them and you take this thing over you could manage just fine. But the problem is, again, war weapons. Like, sure, you survive, but they'll just bomb you out, and ultimately, that's what happens to 12.
yeah, it is crazy. I think you're bringing up a good point though about the like agency kind of piece. Like, I think people forget that they have it. Like, you know, in a lot of ways. Like, I think I
Well,
think a
because they
lot
never knew
of
they did. They've never had it. You know,
yeah,
it's not even
yeah,
anything they've lost.
yeah. They just never
It
had the
is how it
mindset
is.
of yeah how it is. But like to Gail's point, what if no one watched? Like, what if we just like you know like they're not in our houses turning on our televisions? Like you know like what if none of us watched? Like and like you know then they would have to escalate and then it would be more clear that it was more of about oppression and not pageantry and not like voluntary watching this thing you know that kind of thing and I think it's just I think there's a lot of go along just like because we always have and I think Katniss has had to have agency over everything so much that she realizes how much she has kind of in opposition to things as well. Like she's like everything's come down to her, good or bad, like to
Uh-huh.
solve in a way. And so she recognizes, I think, in a little bit of a way, her own ability to affect her environment in certain ways more than other people have. And I think that's the trick here with her is like knowing that there's the choices she can always make they're, you know, good or bad, but she can still make them. And I think I think this is a like heavy.
What do we want to talk about in the actual like portrayal of the games themselves? Because I think that's where people really sign up for this movie, and I think people really remember it. Yes, the 12 stuff is interesting. The capital is her crossing over as we look at like that hero's journey and we start to circle through it, or even if you want to compare it maybe more appropriately to like allegory of the cave and these new sorts of understandings. But I don't know. What did you have any notes on the games themselves? I'm trying to see what I have here.
They trouble me so I don't have a
Yep.
ton of notes.
Yeah, I think that's fair because they're brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, by design, and that movie's it's PG-13.
Yeah. No.
Think of what is restrained there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you make it any. I don't think you can make it anymore with kids, and nor should you. That's not a thing I'm politicking for. But the games themselves, like the gifts and maybe the sponsorships, when we talk about thematic takeaways and like, that's Haymitch and Katniss character development and their relationship where they start to see how similar they are and they can communicate in those ways.
Yeah.
Which again also feels a little bit like really wild technology. The magical medicine that just like heals
that just heals everything.
The deep to the bone burns and like cut in that cut in his leg, for instance, is so deep that it talks like she can see bone is what it says in the book. And so obviously they can't show that, but let's assume that's the case. And then it's like, no, here's some soup and like
stuff.
Yeah.
Some stuff. Yeah.
Here's some witchcraft. And then it's just better. It's like, man.
Yeah. And then
think of that.
And if that's
the most luxury they've ever experienced is in the games. That's their best access to medicine and to like some of the best. She talks about that lamb stew, which I guess she gets on the train, but then also in the games again. Like that's the best she's eaten. That's better than she's ever eaten at home.
Yeah. I think it's everything's so artificial and so, like you said, so advanced and so crazy. I think it's too like, it's one thing I find interesting is though, like they built these games for everyone to be out for blood, but like it's like they didn't count on. It's like they forgot they were people too. Like, like they forgot that like they could make friends. They could not just alliances, friends, and like that could have an impact on how this is gonna work for us visually and story wise and that kind of thing. Like she's getting to be too likable. Like you gave her too high of a score. Like, those kinds of things. Like that whole concept that
Plutarch moving all those pieces too, right? Like you see the power that he holds in starting this thing that can't be stopped. That portrayal of him, I think, is excellent. That's Philip Seymour Hoffman, right? And the way that he's sort of like moving all of these pieces around, and you don't really learn his impact until later on in that film series, but he's moving these pieces around. And then, like you said, you have a Katniss befriending a Rue because she has that maternal, sisterly, protective instinct that she's already established with Prim.
Yeah.
You have Thresh demonstrating honor and demonstrating, I don't want to say grace, but like gratefulness in a space where he very much does not. He has a chance. If you have Thresh kill Katniss in that moment, I think Thresh, aside from getting past Cato, almost cakewalks to victory. Like Clove's already out, but he does it anyway because he knows it's right. Like they're so humanized in the very few moments that we see them as being like they're just kids. To me, the worst pivot the movie makes as it moves away from the text is that Peeta does not lose his leg. And that is silly in the second movie. And like that is such an important point. But I think the best move is giving Cato lines at the top of that cornucopia at the end. Because he doesn't have those in the text. Those don't exist there.
Yeah.
And the power of that, where it's, later on echoed, but this, remember who the real enemy is. And you have Cato standing up there just announcing like, this is all we are, isn't it? Like this is what they want. This is what I am supposed to do. And he, even then, as he has a very good shot at becoming a victor, is immediately seeing the hollowness of it too. And when we think of the message being put out there about, like we've talked about, with agency, with rebellion, with recognizing the power that you have and the rules that maybe people are forcing upon you, like those Cato lines are really strong.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's almost like they didn't, like you talked about the cornucopia moment, making everything real, and
Mhm.
like not, maybe almost not even fully realizing the concept of death until they're there. Like my parents put me in an academy to train me for my death.
Yes.
Like the
And
people that are
that's the book. That's the book and that's the movie that we need a career. If we're gonna,
Yeah.
I didn't need Haymitch's story. I need the career one
Mm-hmm.
is the compelling
Mm-hmm.
story that is not told yet. We
Yeah,
just
give us
don't like,
Cato.
or like, is what's always been unclear. It's like, is Finnick a career?
Yeah, it's not
Like
totally clear. Or is
even,
he just like really good?
yeah, and just like young and like just this anomaly of a person, just like Katniss was really. But
Yeah.
the career book and the motivation in class, we talk about the careers a lot and being pushed towards these things. And my students, when we talk about parallels, they immediately are like, man, softball dads are the type of guys that would train or would put their kids in these academies. Like
That's
that
the thing.
personality would very much still exist.
Yeah. I think that's the whole, that performance, whatever it looks like, whatever appearances looks like, it shows up somewhere. And I think but then like by the end of that, you're talking about Cato's lines, like it's all stripped down and it's like the reality of like I have like this one or two choices and there's like one or two outcomes here. And my whole life has led to these one or two outcomes and they all suck. Like,
And as a viewer, it's the moment where if you hadn't caught on to it already, there's the recognition that like Cato isn't the bad guy.
no, yeah.
He
Yeah.
wasn't the bad guy. He
He didn't
was
ask to get put
threatened.
in here.
He was threatened. Well,
Well,
right. He didn't
he
have
may
to
have
be put into a
volunteered, but yeah.
world where he like got manipulated into thinking
Yeah.
this was a good idea. But he wasn't ever the bad guy. He
Mm-mm.
was just the most threatening and he was just the most fooled.
He was the
just
most prepared.
Yeah, he fell for it so hard that
Mm-hmm.
that moment of clarity, even there at the end, makes him tragic in a way where that, the tragedy is only expressed in the text when he falls off. And then, like, she has to ultimately like mercy kill him with the arrow. But because they make her, the game makers make her.
Yeah. I
And we get
think
to those
it's,
berries at the end.
I think it's very interesting. And I think there's a lot of, I think it's, I mean, Peeta has the political, like you were talking about, like he's kind of got this smoothness and this social intelligence that like kind of couldn't happen. Like Katniss couldn't have happened without that. Like she couldn't have gotten there. But at the same time, there was something about her. It may not have gone. It wouldn't have gone unnoticed. It may not have gone as far without him.
It's a testimony to the power of rhetoric, even when rhetoric is accidental. Like,
Yeah.
you have Peeta, who very much recognizes a capital audience's values, needs, and beliefs, and he appeals to them, and he appeals to them over and over again with a series of decisions that moves them towards an understanding, that moves them towards feeling sympathy and feeling charitable and keeping them alive and wanting to celebrate them. Katniss doesn't make those choices, but ends up being even more effective. Like,
Yeah.
rhetoric doesn't have to be this like mastermind thing. What if you just being you happens to be the thing that appeals in some sort of dynamic, very much previously unperformed way? There hasn't been a Katniss before.
Yeah.
Because, and they make her, you said it, they make her seem kind of dumb, and they kind of dress her up, in this big dress, and she spins around. She's like, oh my God, I'm so dizzy.
They tried to make
And
her
then,
like a frilly little girl kind of thing, and that's just so not her. Like it's like I thought about this too, like the way she kind of reacts in the movie to like the idea of having to put on a dress. I'm like, what's worse? I have to go maybe die today, or I have to put on a dress. Is kind of the vibe a little bit like, and it's like so that character's personality, I think it's just like she's reacting almost as strongly to that as she is at the prospect of what they have to go do that day. Like,
well, and she is so early on, you know, the transformation with her is that she very early she's accepted her death. Once she volunteers, once she sees her mom, she's telling everybody how to take care of them. And Gail's trying to say, you could win this. And she's like, just shut up and take care of my mom.
yeah.
And then she starts to move towards believing it. But until she does, she can focus on like the inconvenience of being a tribute and like having to get her legs waxed and like how
Yeah.
much that hurts and like being
Yeah.
annoyed by the styling team and like how preposterous they are until she finally starts to believe it. And then those things start to fall by the wayside and she starts playing this game before it even starts. You know, when she's in the, what they call it, the training sessions, and it's such a well done look at what personal understanding can lead to once you recognize the power you might be able to hold in a given situation. Might be able to.
Yeah.
Like
I
what
think
happens if I try in these ways? What
right.
could
Yeah.
occur?
Yeah. I think you said something interesting too though earlier, kind of back to Katniss showing up as Katniss. Like, I think everything about this whole universe is it's so contrived, it's so forced, it's so pageantry, it's so survival, like it's so shaded in whatever it needs to be for a very particular reason or purpose, that she shows up kind of like in obstinance to all of that. Not even purposefully, but just like she just is. Her existence is just that way. She's authentically incapable of being anything but herself, and that resonates so deeply.
And
It's crazy.
it's so natural. You know, if you go and you look at how many of those tributes names she actually learns, it's not even it's like a third. She barely even knows their names, right? She has no idea. She just calls Foxface and like we're good there.
Yep,
Like
yep.
that's enough. And I think that is an excellent nickname. I believe in that situation you come up with these names for people and you're just going to stick
Yeah,
to
just
them.
mental
But then
associations, yeah.
you look at Haymitch in book 5, every tribute's name. Every
Yeah.
single tribute's name is in that book. Every one of them is named because he's paying more attention, because he's looking at it in a different way, because he is different. And, you know, Katniss's perspective isn't this this thing that's just portrayed by happenstance. Like that might actually be part of her strength. It's just
Yeah.
being so singularly focused.
Yeah. I think it really is in her particular case. And I think too, like I think there's some different things there. And like I think she just hasn't had the like almost the this is gonna sound a little bad, but almost the privilege of developing a personality. Like
Yeah.
a
That she
little
has
bit.
not had the privilege. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
she has not had the
Yeah.
privilege of developing a personality because like she's eldest daughtering to the max, like in a world of like, I mean, she is just, you don't have, and it's something like I didn't really realize until I was older, but like you don't have the time to be fun and be entertaining to everyone and be like, you know, like having a good time and be the fun one when you're worried about like keeping it together. You're keeping everything held down, and she's very much like doing that in every room that she's in. So she hasn't socialed at all. Like she has
I
not.
think I don't think I've taught this ever where a student hasn't pointed out, and one student put it best, so maybe I'll just quote her, but they said, it's not that Katniss has very low emotional intelligence, it's that it's somehow absent. Like this idea, like this she's like you said, she's never had the privilege of caring about these things or understanding her feelings for Gale necessarily and what those look like, or having any aspirations aside from like, if you're Katniss Everdeen, you have already achieved the thing that you would have as a goal, which is a sustainable way to feed your family until they like naturally die. She's already hit the apex in District 12. Like this is what goal is there? And so anything else would potentially then compromise it, you know, even though she's starting to get to that point with Gale, but she's 17 years old. And like she
Crazy.
doesn't understand how she feels about Peeta.
No.
It doesn't even she doesn't get it, you know,
Yeah. No, she
because she
just has
hasn't. I
not
love the
had
way you
any
said that. She
framework.
hasn't had the privilege to do that.
Yeah. I mean, she just had like, it's just this like overriding like sense of duty that's just like at the forefront at all times. It's like survival mode that she just has. It's just superseding everything. And so I think that's why her character is the way she is. And I think that, like you said, kind of her superpower of like being so completely unique in that way of like you said something and it was interesting to me. So there's like two ways of winning, kind of. It feels like there's rhetoric. You were talking about like Peta's way of rhetoric, which is like
Yes.
the really
Deliberate.
intelligent, really deliberate, really
Intentional.
crafted, very intentional. And then there's and that resonates because you're worried about what resonates with those people and you're focusing on it and you're thinking about all their individual particularities and their specific situation. But then there's Katniss's, which is just base humanity at its fullest display that just kind of cuts through all of it in a way. It's like
that cuts through all of it in a way that appeals, because within that, so now we're like going into rhetoric class, but like within that rhetorical situation, when you then consider the different factors of that context, she is from District 12 and she is female, and Peeta has set her up to be somebody who is loved. And so Peeta, she like inherits this ethos from Peeta, whether she wants to or not. She can't get, and they like her before because of how authentically she, she achieves pathos with them the second that she volunteered for her sister in a place, where they don't do that. And in a way where people don't volunteer for others, they volunteer for themselves. So now she's like way different, right? Like the kind of thing that people might like to think that they would do for their siblings, but she actually does it. And so Peeta then, by saying that he loves her and they become the star-crossed lovers of District 12, Peeta now set her up as like whatever she does, they like him, he desires her. And so she takes in some of that likability too. It's so, these books, I keep saying books, this story is so well done. It's like that element, I buy it. I buy that the Capitol buys them.
I think it's interesting though, like you did say though, she volunteered and that was already resonating before Peeta ever hit anything else. So like even before without that, like it like I said, it probably wouldn't have gone as far, it wouldn't have gone the exact way that it went, but like there was something about her showing up as her, like that was cutting through the noise immediately and already like putting her on people's radar in a way that just was like and I think that's just like really interesting to think about like
Well, yeah, and just to, there's a strength and a softness, and she established her strength. She cannot establish her own softness. So we might like her, but we're afraid of her. And that's another thing we can talk about. But we might like her, but we're kind of afraid of her. And then you bring in Peeta, charming, thoughtful Peeta, and Peeta can then add that dimension to her that is like constantly reinforced. She cannot add to herself. Have you seen the TikToks? God, what is their name? The username's Banshee. And they talk, it's like this 5-minute video about like, have you ever considered how absolutely terrifying Katniss Everdeen is to the other tributes? That she volunteers and then she shows off these arrow skills, but she doesn't talk to anybody except the little kids. And just like the way that she operates, if you are viewing her as another tribute in both, and
yeah,
then she
she's a
sets
little bit
herself on
psychotic.
fire.
Yeah.
And then she acts like a girl, like this young, very stereotypical young woman just spinning around and being like, oh, look at me. After
This
they
girl
saw
is
her with
having a
that
mental
arrow.
breakdown. Yeah.
Yeah. How terrifying. And then she goes
Unhinged.
into it. Yeah. And the whole, I don't know, just the write-up or like the way it was spoken in that post, I thought was fascinating because I've never
Yeah.
considered that. They must be horrified. Of course they're hunting her. It's not a vendetta. They need to get to her while they have the numbers.
Yeah, they need to get to her before she gets to them because she's
Yeah.
erratic at best.
And she doesn't even have the bow and arrow. Glimmer has it. And so
crazy. Yeah. This movie is, yeah, I think like, I guess like, it's like, I think what's fascinating to me is these stories of rebellion and how many people, my goal is to help people do this, but it's mind blowing to me the levels at which people sometimes cannot connect the through lines of parallels of stories that they love and what's happening in the world sometimes.
Yep.
And that blows my mind as someone who just has always done that. And I think what I try to do here is I'm like, if you only are able to even connect with just the parallels that we make and draw on this conversation, then great, then you've gotten something from it. But like, hopefully you learn to see, things in things you watch outside of these episodes a little bit more. And I've had a few people talk to me about that they have started looking at things differently. But like, I think that there's just so much to be gleaned from this source material about like, what is right and like what, treating other people as humans and like what propaganda can tell us and how it can other people and make us okay with things that shouldn't be okay. And just like, I think it's more relevant than I would like it to be, but like it's really, yeah.
As somebody who's taught now for 2 decades, I think my biggest takeaway from a book like this is that it is so important for us to have some kind of text or some kind of source material that fosters all of these different conversations. And so I don't have necessarily like a specific takeaway that I value maybe over
Yeah,
other
for sure.
takeaways from the Hunger Games. But you put this text in front of a kid in the same way that I go pick up my daughters from elementary school and you'd see a 5th grader walking down the stairs and she's reading the Hunger Games. And I know right now she's thinking like bow and arrows, cool. Like,
Yeah.
like Gale has gray eyes. Man, I hope she wins because this is a really interesting, dangerous story. And this seems fun. But then, you get it into a high school space. And now whatever's, and this speaks to the sadness that you seem to be feeling, and I agree with you, is contextually, there's been something to talk about with this book, not just in 2026, but when I started teaching this class in 2018, we had things that we can talk about. But what's valuable is that this is a text that I know that I can speak on and have any conversation that is in front of me. If I can then have a book like this or a film like this in front of students and we can have those conversations.
Yeah.
Because knowing that text and the more of these conversations that I have, the more that I think those.
Yeah.
And so then
Yeah.
they can go and watch Catching Fire now, because if they're watching Catching Fire, they're going to watch Hunger Games. And now we can talk about these things, but we're not talking about how cool or crazy it is.
Yeah.
That's not the
Yeah.
conversation.
No. Yeah.
We're not talking about how good it is.
No.
We're talking about how
Yeah.
bad everything it's about
Yeah.
is.
And I
And
think
that is so meaningful.
I think that's huge too. And like, I think that's what part of the benefit of writing and art in general. I think it's just that we are able to continue to have a medium for conversation to bring conversations and thoughts up to people before they are needing to, like for the rubber meets the road kind of, so to speak. Like you're giving them some framework to hang some values on. And just like teaching is a hard job. My mom was a teacher, and so like I just appreciate so much that people like you are trying to do it thoughtfully and trying to, like teach these kids like, yes, English, rhetoric, whatever, but like also just like, hey, good humaning is mixed in there a little bit, and like that's so important. And so thanks for taking the time to talk about this and like also just like what you do in general. Like seriously, it's so cool that it's encouraging to me as a human being to know that there are people like you out there talking to the next generation of kids about these kinds of things. So yeah.
You might make a guy cry. I really like my job. I love it.
That's awesome. I love
I
that.
love it so much that I've started to then do my job after work on the internet for
Yeah.
people because I not only love it because it's the kids and like I've always loved that part of it, but I also really believe in these things that I teach. And so yes, I make my posts about rhetoric, but like young adult literature is like that's my bread and butter. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't want to be a book talk guy. It's really what it comes
No,
down to.
that's
And
fair
so
enough.
I just don't make those posts. But being able to present these ideas and have spaces like this where like people want to talk about it, like we can have this conversation is so important. And I hope these films continue to reach their audiences. And I hope that a 6th book gives us a career insight because
That would be cool.
if there's a career book, the thing I'm going to then push is read The Hunger Games when we read The Hunger Games, but then afterwards jump straight ahead and watch the career movie because you
Yeah.
know what's going to come out.
Yeah.
And like And that's going to be the move, because I think it's that dynamic where it's like, it is so easy for us. And maybe this is my takeaway. It is so easy for us to look at other people who are on our level and within the same station as being the enemy, as being like the problem, as being the villain. And maybe we're looking inside a fishbowl a little bit too much. You know, we made a whole Hunger Games podcast here and we didn't even talk about Peeta as a rock. I'm proud of us. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you being on. Like, this is seriously fun. Maybe we can do it again sometime.